This talk is intended just to give you guys a little bit of an idea about what we're working on right now at xLab, and to tell you what we're thinking about right now. By no means do we have big answers, but we do have some pretty interesting questions that we're asking. So we look forward to engaging with you guys tonight on this. So people ask all the time, aren't artists supposed to be in galleries and museums? And over the last 2 years, a lot of people have asked us this question and wondered why an artist-run organization advocates for new roles for artists in fields that don't really seem to have any formal relationship to artists. Well, at xLab, we believe that artists have an increasingly important role to play in helping to solve tough challenges in both business and social innovation. However, the way we think about the role of artists must first be disrupted if artists are to realize our full potential. In some ways, art is about power and always has been. Throughout history, any place you find a totalitarian or oligarchical expansion in which power effectively rests within the hands of a small number of people, well, there you are also going to find artists promoting balance, equilibrium, and equity. Tiananmen Square, Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter. Art is a creative political expression. People who make art have a voice. The artist is the activator, not the commodity that the artist produces. Artists are creative disruptors with the power to transform systems, markets, companies, and cities. We divine new solutions, often that others just cannot see. But art is not only about power. In the 21st century, we must grapple with this. Art is about money, but it's still at the same time also about meaning. My presentation today is going to be about artists, not art. Together we will explore the political and economic realities for many artists and highlight a few ways that artists are beginning to work across sectors as full participants in sustainable capitalism. So let's begin at the annual Grand Slam of Money. Last week, world leaders, CEOs, and intellectuals made their annual trek to Davos for the World Economic Forum. From China's economic turmoil to the global terrorist threat to new disruptive technologies, they certainly have a lot to talk about, wrote Xavier de Souza Briggs, Vice President of Economic Opportunity and Markets for the Ford Foundation. But, he cautioned, when the talk inevitably turns to the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots, participants should avoid falling back into yesterday's conversation about inequality. At Davos and at other global forums, discussions of inequality tend to focus on how large the gap is, how wide disparities have grown, and how extreme inequality hurts those at the bottom. Well, this makes the idea of inequality very one-dimensional, something that some of the world's most influential people come to see as a problem, but not one that really impacts them. The reality is that extreme inequality impacts everyone, including the 1%. A growing body of evidence shows that inequality undermines long-term economic growth, and more, it also explains why. While the private sector has a central role to play in tackling inequality and creating inclusive economies, the sector cannot do it alone. Workers, consumers, civil society, and governments also have very critical roles to play, and to Mr. de Souza's list tonight, I would proffer that we also add artists. It is time for leaders across sectors to find new ways to engage techies, researchers, and artists in more meaningful ways. These are our creative disruptors. Artists and scientists throughout history have remarked on the bliss that accompanies a sudden creative insight. Einstein described his realization of the general theory of relativity as the happiest moment of his life. More poetically, perhaps, Virginia Woolf once observed how odd the creative power that brings the whole universe at once to order. In the 21st century, creativity, and perhaps even its value, must be understood within the context of capitalism. But in the 20th century, perhaps no artist is more closely aligned to the capitalist impulse than Andy Warhol. Andy once said that making money is art, working is art, and good business, he said, was the best art. A skilled social networker long before there was a social network, Warhol parlayed his fame into a globally recognized brand because he gave people hope that they would be famous, if for only 15 minutes. If you question whether artists are disconnected from the world or perhaps don't understand where the world is going, think about Warhol and think about the number of selfies that are being uploaded to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter right now. You see, Warhol understood motivation. This is also why he understood innovation. Innovation is not simply a design issue or a technology issue. It is a human behavior issue, and this is where artists excel. But before we go forward, let's go back. Let's go back thousands of years when human development was local and linear. Entire generations lived within physical reach of where they were born. A grandmother and her great-great-granddaughter could possibly live more or less the same exact life. I'm 46 years old, and in my lifetime alone, technology has gone from something that's primarily for academics to something that is now fully integrated into our daily lives. In just 46 short years, we have come to live in a more fully digital world, and distance between people has disappeared. Digital change is at such an exponential rate that today a mother and her daughter will likely live radically different lives. We no longer live in a linear world. Our world is exponential and global. To illustrate this point in business, I will borrow an example from Peter Diamandis, one of the founders of Singularity University. He calls it the new Kodak moment. In 1996, Kodak had a market cap of $28 billion and 140,000 employees worldwide. It was also that same year that they formally decided not to pursue the digital camera. By 2012, Kodak was bankrupt with less than 17,000 employees. And in that same year, Instagram, with only 13 employees, had a market cap of $1 billion. Today, industries like manufacturing, healthcare, and finance are being disrupted by small startup companies. But what happens after the disruption phase? What happens after the disruptive products themselves dematerialize? Consider this. Google's fastest growing marketplace in the world right now is Africa. In 2010, across the globe, there were 2 billion of us connected online. But by 2020, there will be 5 billion of us connected online. That is 3 billion new creators in the next 4 years with the same access to artificial intelligence and technology that you and I have today. So as technology becomes ubiquitous and as our world becomes increasingly digital, the only differentiating factor may well be how people use the technology that is available. Therefore, business success resides in the ability to think creatively about the future. But very few business leaders are going to tell you that their business is good at creativity. And I think this is because business processes are still mostly linear and creativity is not. And this is where artists excel. But what is an artist? Mel Chin, one of my favorite artists, describes art as a catalytic force that allows new options to become visible. The artistic process is an intuitive one, guided by human motivation. Marcel Duchamp's work entitled The Fountain changed everything in art. In one work, Duchamp transformed artists from people who made things into thinkers who transformed things. His lesson here was this: you redefine artist, then you change the work of art. Duchamp used his artistic process to co-opt an entire manufacturing industry and simultaneously disrupted long-standing artistic institutions that have been around for a very long time. He became a catalytic force who made new options visible. This is what artists do. In his book, Linchpin, author and innovator Seth Godin wrote, Our society is struggling because during times of change, the very last people you need on your team are well-paid bureaucrats. The compliant masses don't help so much when you don't know what to do next. We need original thinkers, provocateurs, and people who care. Every organization needs a linchpin, the one person who can bring it all together and make a difference. Some organizations don't realize this yet, that they need artists. People with a genius for finding a new answer, a new connection, a new way of getting things done. But this begs the question, how are we preparing artists for jobs in the 21st century? Basically, the American educational system operates much the same way as it did when it was first designed to support an industrial economy, seeking to train people to become a cog in an industrial machine. In the past couple of years, the group BFA, MFA, PhD has generated a lot of debate around the subject of artist education with their Artist Report Back document. BFA, MFA, PhD asked the question, what is the work of art in the age of a $120,000 art degree? Although I would personally reframe the question to ask, what is the work of an artist in the modern age? Artist Report Back is often dismissed by deans, faculty members, and artists alike as a vocational argument. By comparing rising tuition with future work, BFA, MFA, PhD is accused of reproducing a familiar rhetoric of the economic justification in the ongoing contemporary culture value debate, where value is assessed, most often in a measurable form that is economic, rather than looking at art's value as a public good. But here are some of the controversial findings that the report contains that I think are interesting. Of arts graduates in the United States who reported a visual performing arts degree, 7% are making their living as artists. 24% are educators. 17% work in sales or other office occupations. 11% work in service jobs. 10% in various professional fields. 10% have not worked in the last 5 years. 8% are managers. 4% now work in medicine. 3% in business and finance. 3% in blue-collar occupations. And 3% in a variety of other fields. So what do we do with this data? How should we view it? Here's my take on it. According to the data, artists are already everywhere in our economy. Let's find new ways to more fully allow them to use their skills as artists. The world economy is calling for integrative, macroscopic thinkers. Our work at IDE's xLab over the last 3 years has led us to believe unequivocally that the demand for this new breed of creative worker is growing. In the past 25 years, we have moved from an information economy to a knowledge economy, and now we're moving into a human economy, which the Harvard Business Review recently described in the following way. In the human economy, the most valuable workers will be hired hearts. The know-how and analytical skills that made people indispensable in the knowledge economy no longer give them an advantage over increasingly intelligent machines. But they will bring to their work essential traits. They can't be and won't be programmed into the software, like creativity and passion, character and collaborative spirit. In other words, their humanity. The ability to leverage these strengths will be the source of one organization's superiority over another in the emerging human economy, close quote. This is where we believe there are substantial openings for artists across sectors. But how do we make this happen? For sure, there are no easy answers, but here are a few things that I have observed that I think must be addressed. A different training and education model for artists is needed. The current prevailing model of educating artists is having difficulty getting the job done for the way the economy is growing. Furthermore, most higher education is incentivized financially to keep current operations in place. Second, complex relationships will need to be formed between artists and industry. This is not just a matter of deploying design thinking and turning artists into designers. We need sustained open partnerships and action research that creates radical new career paths for artists who wish to work in this way. As artists deploying creative thinking, is what this career path should be about. not just another group also deploying design thinking. Lastly, arts philanthropy will need to be disrupted. Current models do not, by and large, encourage or invest in innovative artists at the grassroots level. Artist philanthropy is mostly designed to shore up institutions who depend upon the work of artists without many of them having any responsibility for providing those artists a living wage, healthcare insurance, or any of the other benefits that are part and parcel of the American employment system. New business models are needed to provide financial independence for artists. This will not be easy for everybody, but I can assure you, throughout the country, in small and large ways, it is already underway. Ultimately, here's the lesson from the startup business community to the arts world, and education and philanthropy establishment. If you are not going to disrupt yourself, you can be sure that someone else will. Technology has provided democratizing tools that are bringing with them a new promise for both artists and for society at large. Using the tools of the age in disruptive ways in order to change society is an area that has well been trodden by artists throughout history. To put this in a historical context, I want to share with you from the Wall Street Journal recently when they reported a Victoria Gardner Coates book, David Sling, The History of Democracy in 10 Works of Art. Each chapter focuses on a single artist and one of their most significant creations, telling the story behind the sculpture or painting, which, according to Ms. Coates, is inevitably also the story of a nation, a people, or their heroes. The Temple of Athena and the Parthenon depicting the divine origins of Athens and the courage of its people. The history of Picasso's Guernica in the struggle against fascism. St. Mark's Basilica, pride and the treasure chest of the Republic of Venice. The goal of Ms. Coates' book is to emphasize the often underappreciated synergy between liberty and creativity. The creativity in mind is not limited to art. It takes great ingenuity to establish and maintain a self-governing state, as well as great sacrifice, and such is depicted in Jacques-Louis David's Last Breath of Marat, man's sacrifice at the altar of the French Republic. So today, as artists, how do we relate to power and to democracy, to money and to meaning? Let us begin to understand our role in a way that encompasses both past and future simultaneously. Similar to the Ford Foundation, D'Souza Briggs advised to those attending Davos, let us recognize that there currently exists a call in the world to understand the interrelatedness of society in new ways, and let us realize that our value as artists lies not only in the objects we produce, but even more so in who we are, how we work, and most importantly, why we do it. Our value is both as a mirror of reflection and a hammer to shape new realities into the world in which we live. Here are just a few examples of ideas work from over the last couple of years. In a partnership with Workforce Pioneer, Youth Build Louisville, in the oldest African American community in the city of Louisville, we developed a program with them that ultimately created 25 new jobs for young people in this community. We took an old liquor store and worked with a young group of artists, incubating them into a new company. What was exactly about 18 months ago one of the highest crime spots in the neighborhood is now the Community Arts Center for Kids. We developed an intergenerational mechanics training program. One of the artists we worked with on the left, Sarah, she's also a licensed mechanic. She went in, she worked with us, and we developed over the course of a 6-month period a program where young people, young women and older women from the community came together to learn how to fix a motorbike. We developed a partnership with the Yale China Association. Smoketown is the laboratory for a lot of our work. It's where my partner and I live, and it's where a lot of ideas work gets tried out first. In the community, this is Perry. Perry is an artist from Hong Kong, working there with some of the neighborhood kids. Every year now, the artists from China are coming to our community and working with our young people and teaching them about other cultures and what they do. We've developed a partnership with Versailles and the King's Kitchen Garden that was started by Louis XIV to feed the court of Versailles. Every year we send 2 or 3 students from Smoketown for agriculture and art apprenticeships, and then gardeners from the court of Versailles come back as the second leg of that to our community and develop projects with us in the community. The Smoketown Arts Festival is where the culminating point where a lot of this work comes together. It is such a strong heritage that exists in this community of the African culture and the African contribution to Kentucky that we thought it was very fitting that some of the world's best artists and best opportunities from Versailles to Hong Kong come together with our folks in Smoketown and share. We've developed a commercial flower farm with a curator who used to be the curator of roses, actually at the Brooklyn Botanical Garden in New York. She has now moved to Louisville and has developed a commercial flower farm with us in the Smoketown community. As part of this commercial flower farm, we also teach flower arranging and so forth. And this flower farm now has major contracts to sustain itself with a lot of the events that happen in and around Louisville. We love to drink and eat a lot in Louisville, so there's a lot of events. The Federal Reserve recently profiled our work. This was the Smoketown Poetry Opera. We have incubated a group of about 12 young African-American poets, dancers, and DJs, and are teaching them how to do everything that we do, and actually bringing them up as their own theater company to help tell their own stories and give back to their community and teach others. That point of knowledge transfer is something artists do very well. But I think in the formalized art world, you all do it particularly well in Chicago, and Lee and I were just talking about some of the wonderful art public life things that are happening here. That transfer that happens from the institutional level down to the community level gets lost a lot, but you all are a shining example of how it's really done well. We have placed artists inside of major corporations. We have a partnership with General Electric, and we brought an artist in last year to work in an innovation project with them. We're bringing a creative mind into corporations not to just make art. Art usually always happens, but what their creative mind is doing is we're placing them at the table with R&D, with science, with finance, to help that corporation achieve a predefined goal that can be measured. So in many ways, we operate just like any other innovation firm might, except that we've created a framework and provided training for artists who wish to do this to find new ways of employment. And Americans for the Arts just selected this partnership as one of the top 10 best business and arts partnerships in the nation this year. We brought an artist in to work with a local startup company. It was called Thrive 365. Louisville is a big healthcare town, and so we have a major healthcare business incubator there. Thrive 365 is a mobile diabetes food scoring app that helps diabetes patients manage their food scores more easily. Diabetes is a very hard thing to talk about, and a lot of people who have diabetes don't like to talk about it. So one of the things that we did, Man Bartlett here is a social media artist from New York. We brought him in, created a partnership with one of the local media outlets. As a social media artist, he took over their Twitter feed and for an entire day engaged an entire city in a conversation about diabetes, and it was very, very effective. Humana is one of our clients, and in a relationship with one of our sister organizations in New York, Residency Unlimited, we brought an artist, Corin Shadmi, who is from, he lives in Brooklyn now, but he's from Israel. We brought him with us, and this was a project down in Natchez Humana was developing to pilot how to help a community improve health outcomes by 20% by the year 2020. And so it is through all of this activity over the last few years that we have done that we have developed a model called shared value. And shared value is simply this. Our work for artists inside of corporations has shown us that there is the capacity of artists, when the framework is there, to engage the corporations and to increase their competitiveness, engage their employees in new ways. On the community side, we have also shown that there is the ability when it's authentic and when it's intentional in its outcomes to put need fulfillment and cluster development and ethical sourcing up front in a community and working with the community in some of the ways I've shown you. Where our work has become now is we've said, okay, if artists are activating the corporate side as innovators, and if artists are activating the civic side as innovators, what's the potential for bringing these two worlds together? And so the greatest potential that we have found, as we've started thinking about it, we used 3 levels of inquiry that had to be in place. Anything that was created or driving out of this had to be of value to 3 groups. 1, it had to be valuable to a corporate economic development office. It had to be equally as valuable to a grassroots social justice advocate, and it had to be valuable to artists. Not an easy task to put those 3 things together. However, we have come to the conclusion that a healthy workforce is the place for us to start, and here's why. Nearly $3 trillion are spent annually on healthcare in the United States. There are 155 million working-age Americans, 48% of our population. Employees 24 to 54 spend 40% of their time at work. Productivity losses related to personal and family health problems cost employers $1,685 per employee annually. Annually, Starbucks spends more money on health than it does on coffee. Most importantly, though, in most any city in America that you go to, there is a direct correlation between generational poverty and poor health outcomes. If we work to create shared value centered around health equity, we believe that we have the potential to create new roles for artists in the economy and simultaneously work toward a more equitable society. As an artist and a healthcare executive, I know firsthand that artists have an important role to play in transforming health in America. I'm not talking about art therapy here. I'm talking about industry disruption. Ideas xLab was created to facilitate this process. Our vision is to become the top art and health innovation company in the nation, an artist-led company, an artist-owned company with a social mission. Artist innovation, activating a healthy workforce. That's the framework. The community, as I've shown you earlier, that we work in is Smoketown. And I'll tell you a little bit about Smoketown and why it's so important that we work here. Smoketown is not unlike, in some ways, other communities around the country. Smoketown has a 10-year less average life expectancy than the average of the city of Louisville. Smoketown residents have the same life expectancy as someone living in Iraq. If you look just to the north of Smoketown, I think there's a corner around here, maybe. So here's Smoketown. If you look just to the north of Smoketown here, 50 feet across this street, this is the highest concentration of hospitals and physicians and health services in the entire state of Kentucky. So when we talk about communities having access, clearly we have a problem. Right here is the thriving Central Business District. This is the University of Louisville down here. This is where all the mansions are. This is Hipsterville over here in Louisville. So where Smoketown sits, it ranks in the top 3 mortality rates across every major disease category that exists in Louisville. Even though, again, it is sitting 50 feet across the street from the highest concentration of health services anywhere in Kentucky. Our transformational project is called Healthy Days. It's a collaborative framework dedicated to rethinking and challenging the healthcare industry's approach to community health. Currently, healthcare industry is not a healthcare industry. The health system is a sick care system, which responds with clinical or pharmaceutical solutions when people are sick or likely to become sick, rather than helping communities be healthy. The Affordable Care Act has financially incentivized the industry to focus on wellness as a policy, but healthcare's fundamental problems will not be addressed just by new policies alone. We need grassroots politics and practices that expand their knowledge of what creates a healthy community by forging common ground and generating new forms of measuring that go beyond the clinical and instead focus on the well-being of the individual, a social, mental, and physical construct. This is what Healthy Days will do, using artists of all kinds as agents of change at all levels. Healthy Days is based on our cultural blueprint for health, which we were inspired by the work of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in creating. The numbers here that you see at the top are the evidence-based work of the foundation that tell us what actually creates health, what works in creating health. We spend a lot of time talking about clinical access. It's 20% of the equation. Health behaviors, alcohol, nutrition, exercise are 30%. Lots of activity around this area: physical built environment, environmental quality, housing, transit. All of these are very important. But the most impactful way to create a healthy community is based on this category here: the socioeconomic determinants of health. Educational attainment, economic well-being, family support, social structures, and community safety. Our theory of change is this: health is social. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When I said earlier that we had that three-part lens, the corporate economic development guy, the social justice, and the artist, here's the problem. The guys that are working up here, the CEOs of the banks in downtown Louisville and so forth, they do not understand, by and large, why a young black man getting shot or a community of color not having good educational attainment matters to them. They are building an economy. That's what they think of. All that other stuff is social welfare. That's over there. We're up here. We're doing something else. Here's what we're trying to show them over the next 3 years. That through the lens of health and the construct of health, it does matter. Because a healthy individual creates a healthy family, and that creates a healthy community. Healthy communities create a healthy workforce, and a healthy workforce is what creates a thriving economy. Design thinking using empathy identifies needs, and this is what happens up here a lot and works down this way. Creative thinking, the artist activator, will be focusing on these areas down here, the social networks that already exist in the community, how people live, work, worship, and learn in this community, and help those networks become health supporting networks using arts-based learning. Healthy Days is designed to provide new roles for artists in helping to transform the relationship between corporations and communities from generosity to justice. Working toward a more equitable and just city is good for people and it's good for our economy. Building a strong economy requires building a healthy workforce. A healthy workforce requires equity and access at all levels, regardless of race and class. This is our framework for deploying artists to generate a portfolio of strategies that will produce and correlate qualitative and quantitative data in a replicable model for improving health equity. We can no longer grapple simply with what is happening in the world. We must also grapple with how and why. Based on over 40,000 hours of action research, direct on-the-ground experience over the last 3 years between my partner and I, that artists, humanists, have a distinct role to play in working across sectors and shaping the future, from the grassroots up and from the policy level down, toward a shared common goal. A goal that is good for communities, good for corporations, and good for artists. So this is a little bit of the journey that we've been on over the past 3 years in Louisville to develop new roles for artists in a 21st century economy. And so today, let us resign ourselves to eliminating the notion of the starving artist. Artists are powerful change makers. Artists synthesize our world and show it or tell it back to us in new ways. Artists are storytellers of this tribe called human. And we're now turning our unique talents toward becoming partners in new ways with others to take on some of the biggest challenges of the 21st century. In Louisville, we're starting with health.